the helicopter.
I mean, I like kind of brag on Michael Jordan here a little bit, and I think we were a similar ilk with the Jazz. Is I like where guys just tighten their belt up and say, you know what, let's go to work. We just got to get better. Yeah. We got to play harder. We got to play smarter instead of just, where's the grass greener? I'm going to go there and win a championship. I think it devalues that. You're not climbing the mountain. You're taking a helicopter to the top of the mountain.
Agree.
So,
helicopter.
I think it's already in a free fall. I think the Bronny thing started the free fall. I think people around the league are looking like, yeah, you're LeBron, but you're not 27-year-old LeBron. You're not even 34-year-old LeBron. Like, you're an old man now who's dictating and destroying the Lakers because you want your son to play, and look what's happened.
Stockton, open three. Good! John Stockton sends the Utah Jazz to the NBA Final.
John Stockton sat there, calm as ever, and delivered one of the most brutal takedowns in NBA history. You're not climbing the mountain, you're taking a helicopter to the top. The target? LeBron James. The weapon? Truth. And the aftermath? Well, it might just change how we remember the king forever. This wasn't some random hot take from a talking head desperate for clicks. This was John Stockton, the quiet assassin from Utah who spent 19 years getting his hands dirty in the trenches. The same guy who threw 15,806 assists and never once complained about not having enough help.
What do you mean by that?
And he just called out the supposed GOAT for taking shortcuts. But here's the thing. Stockton's words hit different because they came from a place most modern superstars will never understand. A place where loyalty meant something. Where grinding it out with one team for 2 decades wasn't seen as failure, but as honor. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because we're about to dive into why this moment might be the beginning of the end for LeBron's legacy. And trust me, what happens next is going to shock you. The mountain versus the helicopter. Let's break down exactly what Stockton meant when he dropped that helicopter line. Because on the surface, it sounds like just another old-school player complaining about how soft the league has gotten. But dig deeper, and you'll realize Stockton was talking about something way more fundamental. When Stockton says climbing the mountain, he's talking about the Utah Jazz way. Him and Karl Malone, grinding it out year after year, getting their hearts broken by Michael Jordan, then coming back the next season ready to get their hearts broken again.
Gets the foul as Stockton hurries back, so he'll go to the free throw line. Jordan, look out, running. Oh my goodness.
They never once looked around and said, you know what? Let's go find an easier path. Compare that to LeBron's career trajectory. The moment things got tough in Cleveland the first time, he bolted to Miami to team up with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. When that got stale, he went back to Cleveland with Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving. When that fell apart, off to LA with Anthony Davis. Every time the mountain got too steep, LeBron found himself a helicopter. But here's where it gets really interesting. Stockton isn't just talking about team hopping. He's talking about something deeper. The difference between building something and buying something. The Jazz built their championship window brick by brick, draft pick by draft pick, through player development and organizational culture. LeBron's teams, they were assembled overnight through free agency and trades. Now you might be thinking, but LeBron won championships. Isn't that what matters? And that brings us to the most controversial part of Stockton's argument. Because what he's really saying is that how you win matters just as much as winning itself. And the crazy part? More and more people are starting to agree with him. But before we get into that, we need to talk about what this means for how we remember legends when they're gone. The retirement test. Here's something nobody talks about when they're debating the GOAT. What happens to your legacy after you hang up the sneakers? Because retirement is the ultimate test of greatness. It's when the noise dies down, the media hype fades away, and we're left with just the pure essence of what a player accomplished. And this is where things get really scary for LeBron. Because if you look at the pattern, it's not good. Michael Jordan? His legend has only grown since retirement. We went from Michael might be the GOAT to Michael is definitely the GOAT to nobody will ever touch Michael. The further we get from his playing days, the the more mythical he becomes. The flu game gets more legendary. The push-off on Russell becomes poetry. Even his failures, like getting swept by the Celtics in the playoffs, somehow add to his story. But LeBron? The cracks are already starting to show, and he's still playing. Think about it. When was the last time you heard someone get genuinely excited about a LeBron James performance? When was the last time he did something that made you jump out of your seat and call your friends? The radio hosts hit on something crucial here. They said retirement isn't going to treat LeBron well, and they might be right. Because LeBron's entire case for being the GOAT has been built on volume stats and longevity. But once he stops playing, those numbers become frozen in time. And when you really examine them, they start to look less impressive. Playing 21 seasons sounds amazing until you realize that means LeBron was content being mediocre for the last few years just to pad his stats. Scoring the most points in NBA history sounds incredible until you remember he needed more games than anyone else to do it. And then there's the elephant in the room, the super team era. The more time passes, the more people are going to look back and ask, wait, how many of those championships did LeBron actually earn? Because that helicopter comment from Stockton, it's going to age like fine wine. But what's really wild is how this connects to something much bigger happening in basketball culture right now. The authenticity problem. There's something deeper going on here that goes way beyond basketball. John Stockton represents something that's disappearing from sports: authenticity. And LeBron? Well, he might represent everything that's wrong with modern athlete culture. Stockton spent 19 years in Utah. Utah, not exactly the glamour destination for NBA superstars. He could have demanded a trade to a bigger market. He could have chased rings in Los Angeles or New York, but he didn't. He stayed put, worked with what he had, and tried to make it work. That's authentic. LeBron's career has been the opposite of authentic. Every move has been calculated, orchestrated by his media team at Clutch Sports. The decision wasn't a basketball choice. It was a made-for-TV event designed to maximize his brand. Going back to Cleveland wasn't about loyalty. It was about image rehabilitation. Even his social media presence feels focus-grouped and sanitized, and people are starting to notice. The radio hosts mentioned that Hall of Famers who usually stay quiet are now taking shots at LeBron. That's not a coincidence. These guys can smell the difference between real and manufactured. They lived through the era when basketball was raw and genuine, and they're watching LeBron turn it into a corporate product. But here's the really crazy part. This authenticity problem isn't just hurting LeBron's legacy with old-school players. It's starting to hurt him with fans, too. You know how they mention that teams aren't that sad to see him leave? That's because LeBron has never been bigger than the cities he played for. He's always been a visitor, even when he was winning championships. Think about it. When Michael Jordan left Chicago, the entire city went into mourning. When Kobe retired, Los Angeles treated it like a state funeral. When LeBron leaves teams, it's more like, thanks for the memories, good luck in your next stop. And this brings us to the most devastating part of Stockton's criticism. Because it's not just about basketball, it's about character. The Bronny factor. If you really want to understand why LeBron's legacy is in free fall, you need to look at what's happening right now with his son Bronny. Because this situation is the perfect example of everything John Stockton was talking about. LeBron James basically held the Lakers hostage to draft his son. Not because Bronny was the best available player, not because he earned it through his college performance, but because LeBron wanted to play with his son, and LeBron gets what LeBron wants.
Thanks.
This is the helicopter mentality in action. Instead of letting Bronny climb his own mountain, maybe spending a few years in the G League, proving himself, earning his spot, LeBron airlifted him straight to the NBA. And everybody just went along with it because, well, it's LeBron. But here's what's really damaging about this whole situation. It proves that LeBron will put his own personal goals above team success. The Lakers didn't draft Bronny because they thought he'd help them win games. They drafted him because they were scared of losing LeBron if they didn't. And fans can see right through it. The radio host mentioned that people around the league are looking at this situation like, yeah, you're LeBron, but you're not 27-year-old LeBron anymore. You're an old man who's destroying the team because you want your son to play. That's brutal, but it's also accurate. Because what LeBron is doing with Bronny is exactly what privileged people do in every industry. Use their power to give their kids shortcuts that regular people's kids don't get. And this connects back to Stockton's point about helicopters versus mountains. Stockton's kids didn't get fast-tracked to the NBA because their dad was John Stockton. They had to make their own way. That's what climbing the mountain looks like. But the Bronny situation is just the tip of the iceberg, because it represents something much larger about how LeBron has operated throughout his entire career. The Clutch Sports Empire. Here's something most fans don't fully understand. LeBron James isn't just a basketball player anymore. He's the head of a media empire that has tentacles reaching into every corner of the NBA. And that empire is called Clutch Sports. When the radio hosts mention that John Stockton does not work for Clutch Sports and will never work for Clutch Sports.
Well, this much is clear. John Stockton does not work for Clutch Sports. He will never work for Clutch Sports. He may never get a media job that is funded by Clutch Sports. This is the ironic thing.
They were highlighting something crucial. LeBron has systematically built a network of influence that extends far beyond what happens on the court. Clutch Sports represents dozens of NBA players. They have relationships with major media outlets. They influence draft picks, free agent signings, and even coaching hires. When LeBron wants something to happen in the NBA, he doesn't just use his basketball leverage. He uses his entire media and business empire. This is why authentic guys like John Stockton can speak freely, but a lot of current players and media members can't. They're either directly or indirectly connected to the Clutch Sports machine. Cross LeBron, and you might find yourself on the outside looking in. But here's the thing about building an empire. It requires compromise. And every compromise LeBron has made for business reasons has chipped away at his basketball authenticity. The decision wasn't just about basketball, it was about building the LeBron brand. Going to the Lakers wasn't just about winning championships, it was about Hollywood connections and post-basketball opportunities. And fans can feel it. They can sense that LeBron's basketball decisions aren't purely about basketball anymore. They're about business, about legacy management, about setting up his post-playing career. It all feels calculated and cold. This is the exact opposite of what John Stockton represented. Stockton's decisions were simple. What gives us the best chance to win basketball games? He didn't worry about his brand or his business empire or his post-retirement opportunities. He just wanted to win basketball games in Utah. And the more time passes, the more people are going to appreciate that kind of purity. Which brings us to the most important question of all, the long game. So here's the million-dollar question. Was John Stockton right? Is LeBron's legacy really going to diminish in retirement while guys like Jordan and Kobe become even more legendary? All the signs point to yes. And it's not just because of basketball reasons. It's because of cultural reasons. We're living through a time when people are craving authenticity more than ever. They're tired of manufactured personalities and corporate-approved narratives. They want real stories about real people who overcame real obstacles. And LeBron's story, for all its accomplishments, just doesn't feel real anymore. Think about the most beloved athletes in history. Muhammad Ali, who sacrificed the prime of his career for his principles. Jackie Robinson, who endured unimaginable racism to break barriers. Michael Jordan, who got knocked down by the Pistons and came back stronger. These stories resonate because they're about overcoming adversity, not avoiding it. LeBron's story is about optimization. Every decision has been designed to maximize his chances of success while minimizing his chances of failure. That's smart business, but it doesn't make for legendary storytelling. And here's the really scary part for LeBron. The generation that's growing up now doesn't have the same emotional connection to him that previous generations had to their basketball heroes. To them, LeBron is just another athlete with a carefully managed brand. They see right through the corporate messaging and the manufactured moments. When LeBron retires, he's not going to have that passionate fan base defending his legacy. He's going to have Clutch Sports putting out press releases and paying for documentary series. But manufactured love doesn't last. Authentic love is forever. The radio host predicted that in 10 years, people will be saying LeBron was probably 5th or 6th all time. That might actually be optimistic, because once the business empire crumbles and the media hype dies down, we're going to be left with just the basketball. And when you really examine the basketball without all the noise, LeBron's case for being the GOAT starts to look pretty shaky. John Stockton climbed the mountain for 19 years and never reached the summit. But his legacy is secure because we know he gave everything he had to the climb. LeBron took the helicopter to multiple summits, but his legacy is already in free fall because deep down, we all know he chose the easy path. John Stockton's helicopter comment wasn't just a criticism of LeBron James. It was a window into how basketball legends are really measured, not by the numbers they accumulate or the teams they assemble, but by the character they show when nobody's watching. LeBron spent 20 years building an empire, but he forgot to build a legacy. He optimized for success, but forgot about story. He maximized his brand, but minimized his authenticity. And now, as his career winds down, the bills are coming due. The mountain is still there, waiting for someone willing to climb it the hard way. John Stockton never made it to the top, but he's remembered as a legend. LeBron made it to the top multiple times, but he might be remembered as just another guy who took a shortcut. In the end, that's the difference between being great and being remembered as great. And John Stockton just reminded us which one really matters. If this breakdown opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape basketball history. Because sometimes the most important truths come from the quietest voices.